Hello, all of Sector Tailspin here. I just want to talk a little bit about ion storms. Seeming as I have Mr. Unhappy coming over here, Lords of Cobalt giant ion storms coming. They can majorly affect your empire, so you do need to pay attention to them. If you hover over them in the top right, you can see their class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have an ID number, they have a warp speed and a voltage. It gives you a relative strength. Are they a moderate strength? Is it strengthening or weakening? So you can get lots of information there. They are somewhat unpredictable, but they're also sort of predictable. So this little line here tells you they're headed this direction. This can vary by 10 degrees either way. And with there's two types of ion storms. There's a classic one where it's just a big circle. And this one, there's a cloudy version. It's the new one where there could be more than one spot in it, like different multiple circles in it, or different levels of. See, this part's over here is harmless. The voltage changes throughout. When it gets to class 4 or 5, that's when you want to be scared. 3, could suddenly change into, if it's strengthening, it could suddenly change into a 4 or 5, class 4. But 4 or 5 is where it will push your ships, and if you're moving one way, you'll still kind of move that way, but it'll push you off a little bit, and it can lighter ships can be destroyed or slowly destroyed. They can take damage every turn because class 4 and 5 just take your shields out, and then they start to damage your ship. If you're too small, you blow up. If you're around 150 mass, 150, 200, it can start to slowly destroy you, 25% at a time or something like that. There's a website from the Planet's New. There's documentation on it, but then there's a link to this ion storm physics, and you can get more details there. And you can find the exact details and calculate things out. But generally, if your total mass is less than 200, just as a general rough estimate, then you're probably going to be in a little bit of trouble in there. And when I say total mass, I'm including the hull mass, the tech mass, the cargo mass, the fuel mass, how heavy, how much weight there is to that complete ship is taken into account when calculating whether or not you're pushed, whether or not you're damaged. There's also a crew experience that affects it as well. You can't really see that because it doesn't. I don't believe your ships record that anywhere. I don't think so anyway. I know it is. Crew experience happens. It's calculated based on your movement and combat and things like that, but I don't think it's recorded visibly for you. So it's kind of hard to calculate that, throw that into the calculations. So if you got a lot of light ships like I do here, chances are you need to get them out of the way before this monster comes through, especially if it's strengthening. It's moderate right now. It's class 2 in the center, and it's strengthening. I'd say in a couple turns it's going to be class 3. By the time it hits me, it could be class 4. I'm hoping maybe it turns up this way and goes and bugs people over there, but right now it's probably going to hit this starbase, maybe. I believe that McNimble has a plugin that predicts that, but I don't find it necessary because I can tell. I know this is going to come in here and affect me somehow. One thing, Grogg, the Birdman's in here with his Resolute with advanced cloaking. They can if they have their cloak engaged, they are not affected by ion storms. Although I see right now he is not cloaked, so if I were him, I would put that cloak back on before he gets damaged or pushed off course or something. So beware of that, because they can come in on ion storms and it doesn't affect them. There are ways you can put ships in there and they can be pushed like really heavy carriers, like a Gorby or something. You put it in there and it'll just push the ship along. So it's a way of traveling, I guess, without spending fuel. One thing is, if you lay a minefield and see there's a dot, a center of a minefield, if that dot is within this yellow line, depending on what color you are, but if it's within the edges of the ion storm, you cannot sweep that. The ion storm interferes with sensors and sweeping. In fact, you can't even scan it reliably. So you need to be very careful about these, especially if there's a crystal nearby and they drop some webs. They like to drop them when there's ion storms around. Although colonial minesweeping, with the fighter minesweeping, that can get rid of, I believe that can get rid of minefields that are in ion fields. If it hits these guys hit a star cluster or a nebula. There's a star cluster. Or do we have any nebulas? We have no nebulas, but the big greeny blue gas nebulas that are on some maps and with stellar cartography options. Once it hits one of those, it just dissipates. Other than that, sometimes they if it says weakening, it might get bigger, and that's just the energy sort of dispersing, spreading out until it's gone. But you really need to watch, especially if it says strengthening, really watch them. Oh, I should note too that if you're in there, no cloak works except for advanced cloaking. So these little swifts that are coming down, or the meteors, they don't have advanced cloaking. So as soon as they're within the edge of that, their cloak will fail. But the resolute ones and the Darkwing, they have advanced cloaking, so they will not fail. All right, so I think that's most everything to know about ion storms. Just beware and make sure you prepare ahead for those. See you next time.